When I heard that and read this, I read it hours before my talk at the University of Hawaii. I began my talk by saying I support what Dawkins says, that we should ridicule people with religious belief, and I would recommend that he begin that statement in Saudi Arabia and let him start. And the audience just roared, so there was maybe nasty comment to make. He is really complimenting this society of Christians by saying things like that because he can say it with impunity.
Let me just tell you something. For hundreds and thousands of years, this kind of discussion would have been in most places impossible to have, or Sam and I would have been having it at the risk of our lives. Religion now comes to us in this smiley face, ingratiating way, because it's had to give so much ground, and because we know so much more. But you've no right to forget the way it behaved when it was strong, and when it really did believe that it had God on its side.
I dare him to go to Saudi and do that. I dare him to go to Iran and do that. The least he will find out is that not all religions are created equal. If he's telling us our ideas are insane, what does mocking do? If it's an insane idea, what does mocking really do?
In what way does that help the spread of reason?
Oh, well, I think mockery of religion is one of the most essential things, because to demystify supposedly holy texts that are dictated by God and show that they are man-made, what you have to show their internal inconsistencies and absurdities. And one of the beginnings of human emancipation is the ability to laugh at authority. It's an indispensable thing.
So even if he is taken practically, I dare him to do it in a counter perspective like Islam. If he is doing it equivocatingly, then it is not nothing, it is something. If he is mocking something insane, then the insanity actually lies on the side of the mocker. Everything he calls for there violates reason, but this shows you who Dawkins is. He is driven by hate, and that's why many respected atheists want to separate themselves from him. Even secular thinkers took issue with that statement of his and called him to task on it. Dawkins is an angry man, and one day that anger will catch up with him. The atheist has no hope. There's no hope beyond the grave. When life comes to an end, it's gone. It's finished like a vapor. The hope in atheism is not there. It's oblivion, nothingness, straying through an infinite nothing, no up or down, lanterns in the nighttime hours, the noise of grave diggers. Without God, there's no moral framework. There's no meaning, no ultimate meaning, no hope. And lastly, there's no recovery. If you rejected him and you turn out to be wrong, that was a huge gamble you took in life. If you believed in him and you were wrong, nothing doesn't want to be something. That's what Pascal said in his wager.
One of my closest friends is an atheist, and I've asked her why she is, and she told me that she's read the doctrines of many theologies, including Christianity. And as soon as she got to the part in the Bible where she read about Adam and Eve, and they said, or it said, that woman shall suffer the pain of childbirth for the sin of Eve, she told me, I stopped reading because I refuse to believe in something that doesn't believe in me. What would be your response to her?
When a person rejects a certain worldview, you have to respect, if they're being honest, why they reject it. So when a woman or a man says they are denying the existence of God, what are they affirming in its place? She is actually affirming that this God or religion is not true. Atheism is. But if atheism is true, she has no value. If atheism is true, there's not even a point of reference for her worth. The question of morality, the question of meaning, and the question of hope that these are meaningless questions in a purely deterministic, material, naturalistic universe. Why do we talk of good and evil if we are descendants from primordial slime? I say that for the naturalist, even the questions ultimately don't make sense. Why am I not an atheist? I simply cannot find a rationally defensible way for moral reasoning. And the fact of the matter is, we are at our core moral beings. Those who deny God's existence, what do they invoke? Too much of evil and suffering. On what basis? How do they even arrive at that? And when you raise the question of the nature of good, you have to start wondering, how do you really arrive at the reality of good and evil when there is no God? Do you know what Richard Dawkins has now come up with? Dawkins has gone so far as to say we have to deny the reality of evil if our argument is going to stay. So he actually denies there is any such thing as evil. I was flying out of a country where I sat next to a woman who rescues women and children from abuse. I won't name the country, but she told me, she was a Dutch lady. I said, were you successful? She said, I saw the worst thing I saw last night. She said, in this area of city called Snake Alley, men come at night, they consume a concoction of snake's blood and hard liquor. It ravages the mind, and then whatever they want, they are given. She said, I rescued an 18-month-old baby girl from the arms of this man who was sexually plundering her, because that's what he wanted under the influence of snake's blood and hard liquor. Mr. Dawkins, is that evil? Can you imagine there walk human beings for whom that is pleasure? Is this the ravaging of just the brain or the ravaging of the soul? Dawkins says, no, we're dancing to our DNA. Is that what he was doing? It's easy to come up and say, God is dead, God doesn't exist. How then do you make any moral pronouncements of any kind? Read Sam Harris's book, The End of Faith. Read his other book, A Letter to a Christian Nation, where he's challenging America to shred this vestige of God talk and God ideas. When you say something is evil, you assume something is good. When you assume something is good, you assume there's a moral law by which to differentiate between good and evil. And if you assume a moral law, you must ultimately posit a moral lawgiver. But that's whom the questioner is often trying to disprove and not prove. Because if there's no moral lawgiver, there's no moral law. If there's no moral law, there's no good. If there's no good, there's no evil. The question really self-destructs in terms of an objectivity, an objective rule by which to measure good and evil. It's very important to notice that the question in fact affirms that a moral framework exists in life. As I had read in the life of Nietzsche, and done all of the reading about the Third Reich and so on, the impact that Nietzsche's philosophy had on Adolf Hitler. And Hitler, of course, had distributed Nietzsche's writings to Mussolini and to Stalin, whom historians brand the three devils of the 20th century. And I began to recognize how a philosophy, please get me clearly here now, I am not saying that every atheist is compelled to move in this direction. Absolutely not. There are many morally minded atheists, and we will get to the options they do give to us. But the fact of the matter is, when you do lock God out of it, it opens up the terrain for a logical outworking of inventing your own ethic and living by it and justifying it by whatever pragmatism you can bring into it. And the fact of the matter is, you see this again and again. When, for example, at the judgments were taking place at Nuremberg, when somebody was asked about why he had consented to such horrendous, heinous evil, and his answer was that he was operating according to the law of the land, the very answers that Eichmann gave at his trial in the early 60s, although it's more than 2 decades later. Many, an extreme humanist could be a very, very good person, morally good. That is the question is not whether an atheist can be a good person or not. The question is there is no rationally irreducible extension of reason to do that except pragmatically that you want to live in peace. But that is assuming that peace is a good thing. That's only a matter of survival.
some of the most ethical, some of the finest people I know, the most compassionate, the highest people with the highest ideals I know are atheists.
Absolutely. No one has ever said that they are not. The question is, there is no rationally compelling reason for them to be ethical. That's the first point. And the second point is, how did you even arrive at the conclusion that it is ethical to be ethical? Where is the point of reference?
Well, I can't answer for an atheist where that point of reference is, but perhaps in their hearts they found it necessary to be ethical, to treat people compassionately without reference to a belief in God.
But from the rational point of view, if a person comes to the opposite conclusion, how does one debate between the two? To just say out of my heart, that was Bertrand Russell's position. He operated on the basis of emotivism and feeling. Mm-hmm. And no matter how lofty its signs, it's an irrational position, Fred, and that's what I'm saying. And for all of those who want moral reasoning, I ask you, if death is the end, when that moment comes, there's ultimately no difference between a Mother Teresa and an Adolf Hitler. If there's no justice, if there's no judgment, ultimately there is really no comma or punctuation mark, it's a full stop. How does one really hold to a worldview where such are the ramifications of huge differences in lifestyles and values and ethics? I stood behind Mother Teresa on 2 or 3 occasions, but I remember this diminutive woman with all of her limited physical capacity, living with this little white sari around her. Sure, when she died, there were only 3 saris in her trunk. That's all she had. A woman who gave herself to such incredible sacrifice. And what does Hitchens do with a life like that? Writes a vulgarly titled book called The Missionary Position. That's all he had to say about a woman like that.
I'm Christopher Hitchens, and I'm the author of a book called The Missionary Position, which investigates Mother Teresa. I would describe Mother Teresa as a fraud, a fanatic, and a fundamentalist. Everything everybody thinks they know about her is false. Not just most of the things, all the things. It must be the most single successful emotional con job of the 20th century.
My question is it possible for a man or a woman to live a sincere Christian life as a homosexual?
Sex is a sacred gift of God. A disposition or a proclivity does not justify expressing that disposition and that proclivity. That goes across the board for all sexuality. When God created mankind and womankind, it was His plan, not our plan. It is extraordinary to me what He said. He said it is not good for a man to live alone. Well, man wasn't living alone. God was with him. Why did He say that? He created the mystique and the majesty and the charm and the complementary nature of womankind in a way that made it possible for her to meet His emotional needs that God Himself put only within her. Outside of Himself, from Himself, in her, in that complementariness. So you take that sacred commitment, it is a design by God.
Is evolution compatible with Scripture, with the God of the Bible?
No, that's not compatible with the Bible. Okay? Second of all, it's not compatible with science. Okay?
Evolution is not compatible with Christianity, period. The more you understand Christianity, the more you understand evolution, you'll see the incompatibility.
He's right, they're right.